Hello, and thanks for joining us today for our webinar. My name is Kira Mills. I'm an Associate Account Manager here at Samba Scientific, and I will be moderating today's presentation. In our webinar, our Digital Marketing Manager, Ryan Sogge, will explore the power of HubSpot in driving targeted marketing campaigns, enhancing customer experiences, and boosting overall efficiency. His presentation will cover lead attribution, segmentation techniques, nurturing workflows, and integrations and automations. During the presentation, if you have any questions, you can submit them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please put your questions here and not in the chat window so that we can be sure to record your questions to answer during the Q&A session that will follow the presentation. Also, we are recording this webinar, so if you miss any part of it or want to rewatch or share it with your colleagues, you'll be notified in a few days when the video is ready to watch. Now, without further delay, I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Thank you, Kira. Hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for joining today's webinar on HubSpot attribution, segmentation, and nurturing. Today, we'll cover these topics in a biotech marketing context. First, starting with some lead gen basics, just to make sure we're all on the same page here. And then we'll discuss attribution, segmentation, and nurturing of those leads. Throughout, we will cover some key tips and tricks for getting the most out of these strategies within HubSpot, as well as highlighting why this all matters, really to improve your overall marketing strategy. So first, just to cover our bases here, let's go over some high-level lead gen basics. So lead generation really boils down to attracting and converting prospects. And ideally, these prospects fit into your ideal customer profile, but this is not always the case. So using these strategies to attribute, segment, and nurture them will help you optimize this process. HubSpot does offer a wide variety of tools for lead gen, such as forms, calls to action, landing pages to optimize for conversions, chat tools like live chat, chat flows, and chat bots, as well as special integrations with other tools and platforms like Google Ads and LinkedIn Ads. Now, the importance of lead generation might seem obvious to most of you, but it can be broken down really into four key aspects. These are first and foremost building a robust sales pipeline and keeping that built up over time. This involves educating what is often a complex audience. And also it's important to establish thought leadership and building up your brand's authority in what are often very specialized in niche areas. To do all this, you must capture data based on those contacts for personalized follow-up. Now, in the biotech industry, lead generation often comes with certain challenges. These can include what are often long sales cycles, sometimes 12 to 18 months or more. And these tend to require sustained engagement. There are often complex products and applications focused on cutting-edge technologies that require in-depth understanding and thus require detailed content to back it up. You might often be dealing with a highly specialized audience with a limited pool of very discerning buying groups. And you might also come into some regulatory constraints around what you can market and which languages you can use or not use. And this also might come with some data privacy concerns. So to navigate all this, it's important to properly approach your lead attribution, which we'll get into next. So the first step of attribution in HubSpot boils down to identifying lead sources. Ultimately, this is all about identifying where your sources are, where your contacts are coming from, and which marketing channels are generating more and better qualified leads. Now, the importance here is to ultimately measure your ROI, which can then inform budget allocation in the future and help you optimize your future marketing strategies. Within HubSpot, there are several benefits to using their lead attribution tools. These include multi-touch tracking across multiple channels, custom attribution models, and revenue reporting. Now, for the biotech industry, this helps you identify the most effective channels for your audiences, and it can help you optimize your content strategy also for what is, as we've said, often a very long and tricky and complex buyer's journey. And ultimately, and perhaps most importantly, this can help you justify marketing spend for your stakeholders. Now, let's cover some key strategies here for attribution. There are, like we said, multi-touch attribution models in HubSpot. Some examples of these, and this is not an exhaustive list, but some of the most popular options include first touch attribution, last touch as well, linear, and time decay. Now, the reasons why you may use one over another will vary depending on your context, but ultimately, I'd suggest you to try multiple and see which one fits best for your needs. There are also advanced techniques such as making custom reports that are tailored right to your KPIs, using channel integrations to combine data from, say, Google Ads or Google Analytics, as well as in-person events and conferences, and taking advantage of cross-device tracking to follow those users from laptop to phone to in-person event. Now, here's just an example of when it comes to leveraging all this data, how this might play out in the real world. So say you have a white paper on a landing page that's outperforming a recent trade show in terms of lead quality. HubSpot will show you this data based on attribution reports, and you can determine that this asset is generating perhaps more or better qualified leads than your conference. The action that you might then take here is to increase investment in content creation similar to this paper or this ebook or this case study, and perhaps even run a pay-per-click ad campaign to drive more traffic to this source. The result here would hopefully be higher ROI and better qualified leads, since you've chosen the higher performing asset to focus your spend on. Now here we can see just an example of some source properties within a contact record in HubSpot. This is just an example here, but you can see the contact's latest source date, and drill downs as far as latest source as well as first source. So in this example, this contact was first acquired through paid search. And here you could see the Google ad campaign title, as well as the keyword that they may have used to find your ad. And then later, they came back through direct traffic by just entering your website into their search bar. Now, this is just one example, but it could indicate somebody who maybe at first wasn't aware of your brand, and they found your ad through search of a keyword. And then later, perhaps they like what they saw, so they came back through direct traffic here. This could be a sign of someone who needs a little bit more direct follow-up, since they're now actively searching you out after having found you through paid ads. Here we have another example of some attribution data in HubSpot, this time in the form of a report. So here you can see a breakdown of contacts over time based on source. This can be customized to fit your needs. You could look at, for example, all contacts over a course of a year, or just focus on MQLs over the last quarter. But here you can see a breakdown by each source. And then these colors here are each campaign or each asset within that source. A tip here, you'll definitely want to connect all of your external channels, such as social media, Google Ads, LinkedIn ads, etc. And if your website is not a HubSpot site, we definitely recommend installing HubSpot's tracking code there to maximize the data that you can get out of these reports. Now, once you've gathered all this data through attribution and you've properly sourced your contacts, the next step is to segment them. So let's get into it. Segmentation involves organizing your leads based on their actions or characteristics or shared properties. And this is a key step in this process for many reasons. The first and probably the most overlooked reason is simply organization of leads. It's much easier to take the next steps if your leads are properly organized into groups and lists. Doing this lets you personalize your messaging based on how they've been segmented, which will then in turn improve relevance of communication and ultimately increase engagement rates. So you want to make sure that your leads are first and foremost organized just for your own sake. And then that will help you to personalize your messaging and target them more directly. So when it comes to segmentation within HubSpot, this can be based on a variety of data points, such as contact properties, like job titles and degrees, as well as their contact behavior, such as website visits and their sources or email opens, so on. You can also look at company data, such as their industry or its size or location. And then custom fields are super important for segmentation, and I highly recommend that you test some of these out on your own, such as making a field for area of interest or research field. This can be triggered by their interactions and is super helpful for segmentation beyond the default properties that are available in HubSpot. The impact in the biotech marketing space is that using these tools can help you tailor your content to what are often hyper-specific research or application interests, and then personalize your outreach based on those interests and target those buying groups that ultimately are the ones that matter. And then you can adjust your messaging over time for stages of the pipeline, depending on where your contacts are in the buyer's journey. So here we have some key tactics or types of approaches to take. These could include behavioral segmentation, and this is based on interactions with your content, such as visiting your site or joining an event or downloading a paper, and so on. Next, and probably the most basic, but also has the most depth to it, is demographic segmentation. This can start out simple with form fields that they might even give you themselves, such as their name, email, and company. But it can get quite in depth, and here's where I definitely recommend using those custom properties to further enhance this data collection. And lastly is the engagement-based data. This is similar to the behavioral data, but it differs in that this focuses on inactivity versus activity. So the frequency of their visits or the depth of their engagement. This can really help you measure their intent and how serious they are about furthering themselves along the pipeline. So here is an example of a lead segmentation process in action. So for example, you start with a list, which would be an active list or a dynamic list. In this example here, it's focused on research interest. This you would set to automatically update based on a criteria that you set. So if they've downloaded an ebook based on their interest or viewed a page or joined an event, that could be a trigger for list membership here. Doing this ensures that your follow-up content to them in marketing emails and so on is relevant to their interest. So for example, if you create a segment based on oncology researchers, you could tailor their content to breakthroughs in cancer therapeutics through a targeted email campaign, which ensures that they receive content that's personalized to their interest and will hopefully result in higher engagement and conversion rates. At the end of this, what you get out of it, ideally, is more qualified leads. Now, here we can see some further examples of how segmentation is structured within HubSpot. So you can see in this first screen grab here, you're making a contact-based list. In this case, it's based on pharma industry, people that have the power to make a purchase, essentially. So you might group this by using job titles in C-suite or director, president, VP, and then target it as well as based on their interest or their industry, so pharma in this case. So now, once your leads are properly sourced and segmented, they're ready for the final step of this three-piece puzzle here, which is lead nurturing. So in short, lead nurturing is simply making personal relationships with your buyers at each stage of the sales funnel, which will help them ease their process from cold lead to customer. The importance in biotech is that it can help guide them through these complex buying journeys and educate them on technical or very niche products and services. It also builds trust over this process. There tends to be a lot of competition out there, and by properly nurturing your leads, you're building trust that can truly matter at the end of the funnel. So the tools in HubSpot for lead nurturing include automated workflows, probably the most important tool here. These are also called email drip campaigns sometimes. You can also use personalization tokens in these emails to make it, again, build up that trust and make them more personal and more relevant. You can also use forms that offer progressive profiling so that if someone fills out multiple forms over a period of time, they enter their information, piece by piece, as opposed to filling out a full form every time. This, again, just takes a bit of that barrier out of more information capture. And the role here in biotech is making sure that the content that you deliver to your leads is stage appropriate and that it's both educational and informational and relevant to their interests. This helps you maintain engagement during those long processes and make sure that the value that you're giving them matters and stands out through those educational materials and that content. The key here, especially with those automated drip workflows, is to meet those people at the right times in their process and their journeys with the right material. So here are some strategies here for email workflows. Here's an example. You might send someone, based on their interest, a relevant piece of content, such as a white paper or some sort of introductory, sort of top of funnel educational document. And then wait, maybe 5 to 7 days and follow up with them with a separate piece of content or maybe an invite to a webinar or an in-person event. And then again, wait a period of time and follow up after that with maybe a product demo or a promotional discount or an offer for a sales call. Engagement in the workflow, if someone does engage with your emails, might inform lead score and life cycle stages, which we will get into shortly. But before that, here's one more example here of some screenshots from HubSpot that show what is a simple here workflow. So you're starting with a contact-based trigger. And in this case, it's based on list membership. So this is using that list from earlier based on the pharma interest. And quite simply, if someone's a member of that list, they would enroll here in this workflow, receive email 1, and then wait a period of time before receiving email 2, 3, and 4. Now, when it comes to structuring these email workflows, it's important to make sure that you map the proper content to the proper stage of each contact's buyer's journey. This is quite simplified here, but just as an example, starting in the awareness stage, you might start out with educational blog post links or infographics. Also, beefing up your social media presence can help boost that first level of engagement. And here at the top, you're typically focused on subscribers and leads, people whose intent is more for awareness. Moving into consideration, you might also have some subscribers and leads in here as well, but you're typically more targeted on MQLs and SQLs. So for that reason, you want to provide more middle of the funnel content like white papers, case studies, and so on. These offer a bit more meat than the first stage, but are not quite sales materials quite yet. And then lastly, in the third stage, here's where you might offer product comparisons or maybe tools like ROI calculators, maybe even free trials and promos, because ultimately who you're targeting here are true opportunities and customers. Now, the end result of all this is that you ultimately want to, again, convert those leads to customers. And a tool to help this is lead scoring. So this would not all be complete without setting up lead scoring and lifecycle stages. In short, lead scoring is assigning points to leads, typically on a scale from maybe 1 to 100 or 1 to 200 based on properties and behaviors. And then using this lead score can help you set up your life cycle stages. So for example, you might assign positive points to someone based on a job title, or maybe a download of a paper, or joining a in-person event or webinar. This can also go negative. So you can assign negative points to someone who maybe they're using a personal email domain as opposed to a company domain, or if they haven't opened an email in X amount of days, or if they're a member of a list of competitors. So this is just a high level example here, but these lead scores will bounce up and down. Most contacts will hang somewhere in the middle, but it's those leads that generate a high score based on their properties and their activity that you want to ultimately focus on for nurturing. Here's an example of lead scoring setup within HubSpot. This is how you can set a lifecycle stage automatically based on the lead score. So you can see over here on the left, you might set a score based on positive and negative properties. You can add criteria here, customize it to fit your needs as you see fit. Ultimately, what we recommend doing with these scores here is enrolling these people into a workflow that will set a lifecycle stage here based on their score. For example, on the right-hand side here, you can see if a HubSpot's contact score is, or if a contact's HubSpot score, excuse me, is greater than or equal to 50, this sample workflow would set their lifecycle stage to MQL. Before you build these, we recommend working with your sales team and your marketing team to define the lead score structure and set the threshold, as well as define what each of these lifecycle stages means to you and what's most appropriate to use for your nurturing. So to summarize, attribution is really all about sourcing your leads to decide which channels are driving that ROI for your business. Segmentation then comes into play to organize those leads based on properties and their actions and engagement to develop more personalized, more relevant outreach. And lastly, lead nurturing comes into play to deliver that outreach to the right people at the right times in their buyer's journeys. This, ideally, if done properly, leads to higher engagement and converts more leads into customers. There are many more tools in HubSpot to help you along with all steps of this process. Here we've covered the most important high-level features. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A or follow up via email afterwards. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, Ryan, for a great presentation on helpful HubSpot techniques. We do have some questions for you. Again, if more questions come up, please submit them using the Q&A function. So first, can you expand on when you would use different attribution models for reporting, such as last touch, first touch?
Yes, thank you, Kira. So firstly, I'd say I'd recommend trying out all these different types of models and seeing what works for you and your needs. But for example, first touch, which gives the credit to a contact's first interaction, might be more useful to look at if you're more concerned with generating awareness to see what drives that initial buzz. And you might use last touch if you're more focused on lower in the funnel conversions to see what makes people convert towards the end of the funnel.
So next question, how do you handle attribution from contact imports or integrations?
This is a common problem, and I think the best way to approach this is by using custom properties. So for example, if you gather leads at a conference or an event, this is where custom properties come in handy. So if you are at AACR, you make an AACR property based on the year or your booth, and give the contacts that property either through a workflow or manually based on the size of the import. Here, I think it's also, if you're using integrations, maybe like Apollo or ZoomInfo, it's important to work with your sales team to make sure that you're only importing those leads that are actively being worked on. Again, here you could use a custom property based on source, but it can be overwhelming if you're importing leads that the sales team are not actively working on. So try to focus in and use custom properties to your advantage.
Should email nurturing replace direct outreach to leads, or should they be used together?
Generally, I think they should be used together. If a lead has shown more direct interest and has reached out to you, or has shown signs based on their properties or their actions that they're ready to be reached out to directly, then that can certainly happen. But I would still consider keeping them in a workflow as long as they're not being bombarded with emails. If they're ready to sign and they're about to be a customer, then perhaps direct outreach is more appropriate.
Makes a lot of sense. How do you decide on a lead score threshold?
This can vary a lot depending on the specific industry or niche and how you want to define your life cycle stages. But typically, it makes sense to start out on a scale from 1 to 100 or 1 to 200. That way, you're not getting too overwhelmed with like minute details on which interactions bump up or decrease a score. So starting at 1 to 100 is a good scale, and maybe you set your MQL at 50 and your SQL at 75. See how that works for you. This can always be adjusted over time. It's very much a living, breathing property in HubSpot. But starting there seems to be the best approach for most people.
All right. I think that is all of the time that we have for questions. If we didn't get to your question, we will reach out to you directly via email. If you have any additional questions about HubSpot or our digital marketing services, please visit sambasci.com and submit a contact form. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded, so it will be available for on-demand viewing in a few days. We will send out an email to let you know when the recording is available. Stay tuned for more webinars to come and subscribe to our email list to stay up to date on industry news, service offerings, and digital marketing tips and tricks. Thank you again, Ryan, for sharing your expertise with us, and thank you all for attending today's webinar. Take care.
Thanks, Kira. Thanks all.